Welcome to episode 32 of Out of Bounds, a podcast where I give my social commentary on different topics in today's society. I'm your host, Terry, and today talking about, for lack of a better term, should only trans actors play trans characters? And this is just for lack of a better title, as I said. This is really a conversation about all acting and portrayals as far as should a person of a certain identity be the only person to play. And so for me, I'm definitely against this. And I think, not only am I against it, just like kind of casually, I'm very, firm against it. I think it not only doesn't send the message that people want to send, I think it also just, completely creates a self-destructive type of narrative where people don't realize, and I get the representation part of it, but don't realize really what type of message are you sending by saying the only person that gets to play a trans actor or gets to play a person with disabilities or anything is an actor that actually has that identity. And so this started a while ago. Most notably with the Scarlett Johansson movie, and I forgot the name of the movie it was supposed to be, but it was basically Scarlett Johansson. She was going to play a person who was a trans man, and so, or trans, I don't remember honestly, but it was a person that was trans, and so I believe it was a trans woman actually, but anyway, nevertheless, there was a big backlash. And we've seen this, like, honestly, this isn't pertaining just to genders. This is a thing that's problematic to me in all of media as far as fans complaining and feeling entitled. But in this case, we get a backlash because she wasn't a trans person. Everyone said that, this person should be trans. And there was a huge debate about it. But at the end of the day, the people that felt like they were on the side of, yes, it should be a trans actor, they really didn't understand the business side of it. Now, when we're talking about media, you can't take out the business side. A lot of people try to take out the business side and just talk about it as a social issue, but you can't, because these are businesses. They're here to make money. And so when you're talking about a movie that Scarlett Johansson was going to produce and star in, that movie does not happen without her. And some people were just like, okay, yeah, if it's not going to happen without her, then I'd rather it not happen than to happen with her as the lead. But there's other people that just don't understand why the movie got canceled. And it's just, you have to understand Scarlett Johansson's name. If Scarlett Johansson was a trans woman and she still had the same name that she does, it would still be the same case. And so it isn't about the identity. It's about the cachet that the star or the producer, the writer, or the director has, more likely the star. And so that's how it all kind of started, but you see it more and more. There was The Upside recently, a smaller movie that people didn't really know about, and that just goes to show you that people don't really care that much, because they only care when it's a story. Again, the agenda follows the money, and so nobody really knew about Kevin Hart doing The Upside. It was a smaller movie, but when it came out, then everybody was upset because Bryan Cranston was playing a person with disabilities. And they were like, well, that role should have went to somebody with disabilities. This is after the movie was already out, mind you. And so, people were just upset even though the movie had been shot a while ago. But so to the question, should it be those persons with those identities? Now, the pros and the upside to that is I understand the discussion. They have some type of perspective that leans more into that character, and that can, I wouldn't say properly, but can probably add a dimension that a different actor wouldn't be able to. But at the end of the day, we gotta understand what we're talking about. People throw context out of the window. We're not talking about, hey, should cis person become a trans or pretend to be a trans person in everyday life. No, we're talking about a movie. We're talking about TV shows. We're talking about acting. This is a art form. This is something that you can study. You can get degrees in. You can train in. It is a technique. Acting is the profession of turning yourself into something you are not. And so when we're talking about just the context of it, we're talking about actors whose job it is to transform and to do their research and do their best job to portray a character that they don't actually connect with on every level. There might be some similarities, but at the end of the day, you're never going to 100% play Denzel Washington. Hugh Jackman isn't ever going to play Hugh Jackman. I mean, they might, but you know what I mean? Most of the roles, they're playing someone else. And so should we say, hey, Hugh Jackman shouldn't be the greatest showman. We should only get somebody that actually ran a carnival. You know what I mean? And that's the slippery slope argument that people try to poo-poo, but it's true. It's like, well, if we draw the line here, then how far does this line go? You know what I mean? And so, of course, there's fictional characters where people are a little more lenient, because then the argument would be, well, why does everybody want a black Superman? Why do people want different, a race swap with superheroes? Why do people want a gender swap with different characters? And the answer is always, well, they're fictional. They're not real. So you can make them what you want. And that's a different conversation. But then when we're talking about fictional people, it's like, look at the history of our greatest actors and what they've been able to do. And you're going to really sit here and tell me that they shouldn't be able to do it because they don't carry that identity. And so there's that. But then at the end of the day, it hurts your argument. And so you say we want this representation. Well, what representation is it when you say only trans actors should be able to play trans parts? Okay, well now you're saying we're limited, and then people will say, no, we're not saying they only should play trans parts, but they should have all the trans parts. Well, then what's stopping somebody to say, well, your argument is a trans person is the only one that can convey the message and the realism to that scenario because they went through it or have some connection to it. Well, then what's stopping somebody to say only a cis person, only a hetero person can play this part because they have that same connection? And then again, we talked about before historical context. Well, historically, only straight, blah, 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 blah people have been given roles, so they don't count. No, you can't make an illogical argument based off historical context. And so you don't get to just say, historically, we've seen such and such in a role, so that gives us an excuse not to include them in roles and include us in all the roles, but exclude them from our roles and we only get those roles plus include us in more roles. That's not how it works. It's always going to be equality as far as pushback, as I said. If you're going to say, hey, whenever we do a trans part, it needs to be a trans actor. If it's going to be a person with disability, it's going to be an actor with disability. If it's going to be somebody African American, we only get African American, and so on and so forth. And so you set those lines and those boundaries, and that's going to come back to bite you because then you're putting yourself in a box. And so a lot of people will be like, well, we didn't say they can only do those parts. And it doesn't matter if you're not saying that. You're saying that they should only get those parts. And people are going to respond, well, then these people should only get these parts. And now we're getting to a point where you're just saying, okay, well, only somebody that has the identity of the character gets to play that character. And how productive is that? Business-wise, it's not productive when you're trying to get stars. Representation-wise, it's not productive when you limit it in the roles. And so it makes no sense to me. I don't see any positive, I don't see any positive outcomes from it. And so it's one thing to just talk about, representation. So you think about Orange is the New Black just as a random example. There's a person in there that's a trans woman, and it wasn't like, okay, only this trans woman can be in here. It was the idea that let's include a trans woman into the script and let's write them in. That's real representation. Now you include a trans woman in, you can decide to get somebody that's not trans, but then you get somebody that's trans. And so now you have a new actor who is out there and being portrayed, but they're not being portrayed in a way that's forced, where it's not like, okay, we have to force this in here. And so even if the Scarlett Johansson movie continued on, they got a trans actor and they continue with the movie, it wouldn't do it well because people would have had a backlash against it. People would have supported it, but there's also would have been a backlash. So it's just, to me, again, you're just limiting yourself. Now, there is, again, true representation, true equality, as I talk about. There's this idea of we can get a diverse people or diverse ideas in a room so that we're writing stories with different characters. We're including different characters in different ways than we might have. We're giving people different shots to create the stories, but then the people that portray those stories, that's their job. So we can't sit here and say, oh, well, only this and this. I mean, you think of Aladdin, recently just came out. I'm watching Aladdin. Again, Naomi Scott is half this, half that. I forgot what, I know she's British, but she's mixed with something else. And again, for all intents and purposes, she doesn't come off Middle Eastern. And then you got, the actor that played Aladdin, Meneem Mossad, and he's Egyptian. We're talking about a Middle East story. We're not talking about an African story. Egypt is in Africa. And so you got Will Smith again. And so there's a number of things where you could be like, well, this doesn't quite fit here, but you're getting talent. And that's what the point is. And so if you're trying to make a movie and you got The Rock lined up, you got, John Cena lined up, or, whoever, Will Smith, whoever you got. And it's like, okay, we're trying to get the best talent in here. We can work around those other things. Now, when you're talking about actual characters, it's a little more strict, but still, it's the best talent. So we could go down that line forever of Oscar winners who portrayed people who were real life people. And you can point out 1,000 things that don't connect with their identity, but they pick the best talent to portray them. And that is the mark of the best acting. When you get awards, is those that can portray something completely different than them. And that's what the challenge of acting is. And so there's the obvious part, I feel like, with acting and what it means. But then there's the business part of getting talent. And then there's the end part of social justice where it doesn't help representation for you to box yourself to those roles. Because if you say, once again, hey, only a trans actor should be in that role, then what's stopping? What is really stopping somebody from turning around and say, well, only a cis gendered male should be in this role. We're not taking trans men. And so you and I'm not going to get into it too much, but you perform, I'll say, as a trans woman, all the things that go into making yourself perform as a trans woman and present as a trans woman. You still probably feel like, well, I could do all that same stuff to present as a normal I shouldn't say normal, but as a heterosexual cis male. And you say, I'm an actor. That's my job. It's not natural to me, but I can do that because that's what my job is. What's stopping anybody saying, no, we're just going to get a cis male to do it? And so I think it limits everybody. So anyway, that's my thoughts. Go to the comment section. Let me know what you think. Thumbs up, subscribe, share it around, get the conversation started. Until next episode.